Hi, folks. I'm Jim Yu, and I am the chair of the NEA BPD board, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this NEA BPD webinar called Parents Traps. What does DBT dialectics offer us in navigating agonizing parenting
Thank
dilemmas?
you, Jim. So, hi, everybody. My name is Andrea Gold. I am a board member of NEA BPD, and it is such a treat to be here with all of you and Dr. Charlie Swenson. We are really honored to have Charlie donate his time and expertise to speak with us today about a topic that is at the heart of NEA BPD. It's validating and understanding the suffering that emotion dysregulation can bring to parents and families, and giving us hope and a way forward, a way to get unstuck. So Charlie's going to talk to us today about dialectics from DBT. And when I think about expertise in DBT worldwide and dialectics in particular, Charlie Swenson's name is the one that comes to mind for me, right up along there with Marshall Linehan's. And when we invited Charlie to do this podcast, he shared that his goal was to really give families a practical tool. And I want to share that that's no surprise that his book, DBT Principles in Action, we've got this in action piece because it's not just about learning about these skills in an academic way, but really putting them into action to help people who are in hell get unstuck. Charlie has been hosting a podcast for well over 100 episodes on our NEA BPD website called To Hell and Back. I highly recommend checking that out if you're curious about DBT skills or getting out of hell. You can find that on different podcast forms. I'm going to hand it over to Charlie to start talking to us about parent traps together. Welcome, Charlie.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't know how many of you there are out there, but I was telling these guys earlier that compared to all the training I've done, because I've done a large amount of training in the past 35 years, I find myself really anxious just knowing what parents go through and family members go through, and I know personally as well as professionally, and I know that it's huge. And so I just hope that something I say will be practically of use to you and not just theoretical. So I want to start by dedicating this webinar to my very close friend from years ago who passed away, who began NEA BPD. Perry Hoffman began NEA BPD in 2001. And Perry was my social worker on my inpatient DBT program that I developed in the late 1980s and early 1990s. And I have a picture of her in the first ever DBT intensive training. Most people haven't seen this picture, so this is a little premiere for you. This was the very original DBT intensive with Marshall Linehan in 1993. And you can see, if you can see this, you can see Marcia in the middle with her red sweater on. And you see Perry Hoffman at your upper right-hand corner. I have to get myself oriented, in the white shirt. And you'll see me, yours truly, in the bottom in a white shirt and tie. So I just wanted you to see that's Perry. This is dedicated to Perry. She was a dear friend. She did DBT with me for many years. And I think Perry and I probably did the first family group ever for DBT. We had an inpatient program with 18 patients with borderline personality disorder. And Perry and I ran a multiple family skills group, or multiple family group, where we were tried to be very supportive and just let people talk and be validating and blah, blah, blah. But actually, after a while, we just decided, why don't we teach them the skills? And so we literally changed our agenda. And instead of getting our usual 5 or 6 family members, everybody's family came. After a few weeks, they heard, oh, we're learning the actual skills. And we heard over and over again, you know what, these skills are for us. And it's really occurred to me, it's so true. DBT was developed for somebody who's very stuck in their life, who can't decide whether it's worth it to live, who feels like the only choice in life is between suffering and death. And that was what Marshall Linehan was interested in, was how to help people stuck like that in that version of hell, and how to get them, how to get into hell with them, and how to get them out. I mean, that's the whole mission of DBT. And then what we found once we started meeting with all these family members was everybody was in hell. I mean, everybody was stuck. Because if you're very attached and you love somebody who is suffering in that way, that they have to be in a long-term hospital in order to survive, then you are stuck too. Because you can't turn your mind off at 3 in the morning. You can't not worry about the next telephone call that's coming. You can't not worry about whether your relative is going to move forward or not in their life. And while it wasn't the reality show you signed up for, you're like on the 200th episode in the series 10 of your reality show, and it just keeps happening. It's really hard. So I realized in the past many years that in a way, Marshall Linehan developed DBT for the families. Because the families are appendages. They are the people who matter and who keep other people alive and keep struggling and keep banging their heads against the wall to try to make progress and keep looking for resources that aren't there and keep looking for systems of care that are broken and keep having to try to cope yet another day, another night with their relative who won't leave their bedroom or who won't stop drinking or who won't stop using drugs or who won't talk to anybody, or who won't go to therapy, or who won't stop hurting other people sometimes, who won't stop being involved in the hospital system and the criminal justice system, people who won't take their medication or they take too much of it. And all of these situations that family members face that are so hard. And so DBT is developed for that. And I think those of you, oh, by the way, I just want one more word about Perry Hoffman. One of the brilliant things about Perry, and I think it really captures the spirit of NEA BPD. I really have to thank NEA BPD for sponsoring my podcast for all of these years and for people continuing after Perry was lost to carry on the work that she started there and that Abby Ingbar is the leader of now. And I really appreciate the kind of work that she's continued and that the whole board has continued. So Perry used to say this thing to everybody. I must have heard this 50 times while we worked together. And then I heard that she worked with other people and said the same thing, which is, if you ever had a question about how you were going to move forward with something, Perry would always be there to say, we'll find a way. She'd just say, we'll find a way. Whoops, one sec. And I think NEA BPD still captures that. My friend Andrea Gold captures that. She'll find a way, and NEA BPD. So I just wanted to say that. I'll just say, what is it that DBT has to offer family members who are in those situations? And what do I have to add to that in this webinar? So let me say first, DBT, those of you who have attended Family Connections workshops or MSTR, managing suicidality and trauma recovery workshops done by NEA BPD already know that all those skills, all those perspectives that are offered there are just vital. I mean, you've got to be able to be mindful of your emotions so that your emotions don't overwhelm you. Mindful of your thoughts so that you don't start believing in pessimistic thoughts. You just see them coming and going. And that you can radically accept painful realities, which helps you let go and let go day after day with things that disappoint you, that hurt you, that tire you, and let go and on to the next thing and on to the next day. That this is a situation in life that requires courage and it requires stamina. And actually, you need these skills in order to help you with that. You need the skill of accumulating positive emotions. which is also talked about, where you need to keep doing stuff that is meaningful to you, is fun for you, gives you a respite. You need to find ways to do that and not have your love of your relative completely darken the sky for you. It will darken the sky for you sometimes, but do what you can. You need to learn to act opposite some of your emotions so that you don't just sort of bury yourself and avoid what's going on in your life, but you keep moving forward. And you need to learn how to validate your relative, even when they're doing things that you disagree with, and validate yourself and take care of yourself. So all of those things and more are offered in the Family Connections workshops. So I recommend that if you haven't had a chance to do that before, whether you are a clinician, a family member, an interested friend, or whatever. So DBT just has so much to offer somebody who is stuck, somebody who is in some version of hell. And so many people of you that are listening right now, I'm sure, have been in some version of hell where you don't know how you're going to get through the next 24 hours. And there's so many things that sort of fall down in front of you, and you have to keep picking yourself up and doing things. And then actually, when your relative is doing better, your life changes like overnight. It's like, oh my God, look what I've been carrying. And so it's so hard. And so I recommend it. So DBT offers all of that. What do I have to add to that? It isn't that what I'm going to add is fundamentally different in nature than what you guys know, what you've been learning, what you've learned on your own, what you've learned in workshops like Family Connections. Um, but it is sort of a specialty of mine. I've been interested in dialectics for a long time. From the beginning of DBT, it's probably one of the areas of DBT that has sustained me way longer than I thought, because I originally trained as a psychoanalyst. And I thought I would spend my career doing psychoanalytic psychotherapy with people with borderline and other disorders. But once I discovered DBT, I thought, well, I don't know, this is just a behavioral treatment. I mean, I'll learn this and move on. But somehow it caught hold of me 35 years ago. And part of that is because of mindfulness. And part of that is because of dialectics and all of the ways that all of this is integrated. So let me talk to you about dialectics, because some of you might not know what it is. And that's embarrassing, isn't it? When you say, well, I'm learning DBT, but actually the first word is dialectical. And you come out of and somebody says, oh, you do DBT, you went to a workshop. What's dialectics mean? And you have no idea. It's like, I mean, even though it's been explained, because people have been working on this for about 3,000 years. There was a philosopher in Greece, Heraclitus, that came before Plato and before Socrates, and they came before Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels and other people and Hegel, all of these people that have developed the idea of dialectics. So there's no way I can condense that down into the next few minutes. But I do want you to, from a practical point of view, you can condense it down. And here's the condensation of it. And here's what I want to tell you, I think has been helpful to me as a family member, helpful to me as a clinician, helpful to me as a person, and might be helpful to you. If the shoe fits, wear it. And so the idea, of course, is this. It has to do with how truth evolves. I know that sounds like a big philosophical topic, something for a freshman in college to write a paper about, but it's actually a real thing. Like, how do you get from point A to point B? And the idea of dialectics is a very particular way of thinking about that. So, backdrop, worldview of dialectics. What's the worldview? The worldview of dialectics includes the following. First of all, everything at every level of every being and even non-beings in the whole world is constantly in motion. Doesn't look like it. Look around you, you see walls. The walls are actually in motion. Look at your bones. Your bones are actually in motion. People used to think, well, the nervous system, at least that's one thing that's permanent. No, it's not. It's constantly changing. It's like there's nothing that's not changing at every level. So when I have a patient that comes into me who's depressed, and I say, how are you today? And she says, same old, same old. I say, can't be true. She says, no, it is. Same old, same old. Same old depression, same old walls, same old activities, same old pessimism. Say it can't be the same. It can be all those things, but it can't be the same because actually every molecule is different in me and in you and in everything around us. Like it can't be different. It can't be the same. So that's sort of one perspective about dialectics is that there is nonstop motion going on. Number two, everything is interdependent with everything else. There's no such thing as an isolated thing, an isolated person, an isolated idea, an isolated emotion. Everything is related to everything else, all right? So that's another worldview about dialectics. Everything's interconnected, interdependent, and everything is in motion all the time. Number three, because everything's in motion and everything's interdependent, opposition happens all the time. Like if one of my fists is one part of reality and the other fist is another part of reality, maybe we're going around next to each other for a while, but occasionally we're going to clash. We're going to go up against each other and there's going to be tension. We're going to get stuck. Okay? So the idea is that reality is made up of stuckness over and over again, and then movement, and then stuckness, and then movement. And so if you say one thing in a room, if all of us were in a room, there's probably about 800 of us or so, or something like that. If there's that many people in a room and one person says, God, it's kind of hot in here, I swear somebody's going to say, God, I thought it was cold. It's just natural. If somebody says, who's going to lead this group? As if there should be a leader, someone else is going to say, I don't believe in leaders anymore. The way things are going, I think we should have a leaderless group. And then there'll be a collision. So almost no matter, and if you say to your relative who's stuck in their bedroom or on the couch or in the basement, and they won't come out, and they won't try a job, and they won't go to therapy, and they won't talk to you, and they don't want dinner, and you don't know what the hell to do, there's an opposition going on, right? There's the wisdom of what you're doing, which is, I want to help you. I want to help you move forward in your life. I want to help you build a life worth living. And then there's the wisdom of their position, which is, I'm not ready to do that. I can't do that. I won't do that. I don't believe in doing that, or I can't fathom doing that because I'm terrified. Whatever it is, it's sort of like there is a natural collision between a parent and a child, or a parent and another relative, or one person and another person, and it goes on constantly. It goes on, and there's one after another after another. So ideally, you should just accept that and accept life is a series of collisions. Life is a series of oppositions, and then things that are in between oppositions. But that there's a lot of opposition, and it's to be expected. And it's part of what life's made up of. So these are like the basic principles. And if you put together those three principles, right, the principle of non-stop motion, of interdependency of everything, and of oppositions always coming about, that's just the way reality is at every level of reality. Okay, so what does that tell you about how things move forward in the world and in life? Well, it tells you that you're going to come up against some collisions where you get quite stuck. You don't know whether to date this person or that person. You don't know whether to get married or not get married. You don't know whether to go to school or to give up going to school. Take this career or that career. You don't know whether to say something to your relative that's mentally ill right now or say nothing. That in itself can occupy you for half an hour at your home, just wondering, should I speak? Should I speak? If I speak, he or she's going to be mad at me, or I'm going to miss the point, or something like that. It's sort of like every little thing when somebody is struggling the way your relative is, every little thing becomes like a big deal. And you have to kind of let go over and over again and recognize, okay, we've collided. We're in opposition with each other. We're stuck. And here's where dialectics specifically, practically comes into play, is that dialectics comes in because it's an idea of how the next thing happens in life when there's stuckness. And this is why Linehan brought it into DBT. She had already built in DBT, how do you change people's behavior based on cognitive behavioral therapy. Then she had added in lots of validation and acceptance because she realized people are suffering so much, and she thought that those things were the best answer to suffering. But then why did she bring in dialectics on top of those two things? On top of change, on top of acceptance, she added in dialectics. What the hell was she doing? She did that because even with change and acceptance, things kept getting stuck. In therapy, you'd say to your patient, in therapy, say, I think maybe you'll need to go in a hospital. Patient says, no way, I won't go in. Or I had a patient on my hospital unit, 19-year-old girl, who came to her therapist one day and said, I'm leaving the hospital today. And the therapist said, no, you're not. She said, yes, I am. Okay? Collision, opposition happened right there. Very savvy therapist, as you'll hear. He used dialectics right there because here's what happened. He said, well, you really can't leave now. I mean, you actually harmed yourself this morning. So I can't wait to help you get out of here. That's what we're working for you to build a life outside the hospital, but it can't be today. And she said, to hell with you. I'm leaving today. I've had it with this place. It's not helping me. And what happened this morning was nothing. It's nothing. And he said, well, I can't go along with you. She said, how do I get out of here? Because it was a locked door. He said, go to the nursing station. There's a form there. If you fill out the form and sign it, it's called a 72-hour notice. This was in New York. It's not Massachusetts. Every state has their own system. It's within 72 hours, a judge will decide whether you can leave or not. You'll present your case. The hospital will present its case. The judge will decide. All right, give me that form. Go to the nursing station. Hey, by the way, when you fill that out, I think you and I should then have a session. Why do we need a session? I'm leaving. We need a session because I want to help you learn the skills that you'll need to present your case. I'd like you to be skillful. Wait a minute. You're telling me that you're going to give me skills to try to beat the hospital? He says, it's even worse than that. I would like to teach you skills to go into that meeting with the judge, because you know who's going to be arguing against you on behalf of the hospital? Me. And I've done this for years, and I'm really good at it. So I would like you to be a worthy opponent. And have the skills. And whether you win or lose, I want you to be proud of what you did. That's crazy. He said, that's DBT. So that's really a dialectical intervention. And I'm not saying that's what you can do with your relative, but I'm just giving you a brief sampling. The idea is that you come to a collision, and in response to that collision, you against your relative, or you against your partner, your spouse, about your relative, or you against another family member about your relative, or you against a doctor about your relative, or whatever it is. When there's a collision, the answer forward is not to say that one person is wrong and the other one is right. And so we're going to cancel the one that's wrong and overcome them and eclipse them, and they're done. No, that is a certain way of thinking. That's not a dialectical way of moving forward. Another way of moving forward is to say, well, these two things opposing each other, they can sort of live with next to each other, but we don't have to reconcile them. That's a different way. That's called relativism. It has nothing to do with being a relative, by the way. Now that I think of it, it's just relative. It's called relativism. And then the third way of moving forward is dialectics. And dialectics is you move forward by finding what is valid about each position. My relative that doesn't want to come out of his room, and me who wants him to come out and go do something with me, we're both right. The idea is there's something essentially valid about my position, and there's something essentially valid about the family member who wants to keep using drugs, the person who wants to go burglarize the next door neighbor again. Whatever is the problem, there's something valid to find if you get inside the skin of the other person. Or maybe you're at war with yourself. You have to get into both sides of yourself and see, actually, this is a valid conflict. I'm in conflict with myself about whether to do this or whether to do that. And don't you find as family members that hardly a day goes by if your relative is there with you, that you aren't at war with yourself? Because it isn't just that you're at war with your relative. Your relative is a kind of like fact of life, like your relative is being whoever they are. But you don't know, should I do this or should I do that? Should I call his doctor or not? Should I intrude into his room and talk to him or not? Should I hide all of the alcohol in the house or not? Should I read him the riot act, set some limits here, and give an ultimatum? Or should I not? It's like you live between these various things, and there's 100 versions of this. And I'm sure many of you have these kind of things go on because you can't not. This is what you're dealing with. You're dealing with love. You're dealing with attachment. And you're dealing with people who you care about who are suffering. And you are suffering as a result. So of course you're clashing, and you're clashing with yourself, and you're clashing with your husband or your wife about, because you have different points of view about how to proceed. It's just filled with that. So dialectics, I'm going to give you like a 6-step formula. Okay. Here's the practical blah, blah, blah of Charlie Swenson's comments today. And I live by this formula. I have gone through this formula many times myself as a person in my own life, as a family member myself, as a doctor, as a therapist with my patients. I think this is a helpful formula, which you might find useful or you might not. So here's how it goes, though. Step one, you recognize that you're stuck. Sounds rather simple. Step one's rather simple, but it's really not that simple, because a lot of times we deny that we're stuck. A lot of times we don't want to think that we're stuck. Someone else says, gee, you seem stuck. And you say, no, I'm not. Things are fine. No, that's not true. Actually, you're stuck. You don't know what to do. That's why you're awake late at night. That's why you're waiting for that fateful phone call. That's why you're very upset about what's going on. You're stuck. There's a certain way you're stuck. So step one is really a mindfulness practice. It's mindfulness of stuckness. It's mindfulness of the emotions that go with being trapped in hell. It's mindfulness with the thoughts that go, the pessimistic thoughts, the judgmental thoughts, the blaming yourself thoughts, the blaming your relative thoughts, the blaming your spouse thoughts, the blaming the system thoughts. All of these things, these are all part of the stuckness. These are part of a certain version in the moment of hell. Might be better later, might not be better later today, but you've got this problem. Okay. Step one. So if you
Charlie,
can
I jump in with step one just to clarify? Because I can imagine people listening thinking, well, of course I know I'm stuck. Of course I know I'm in hell. Why do I need to do this? Could you hover for a moment on how to recognize we're stuck in a mindful way versus a mindless way or a judgmental way, and what the difference is there?
Yeah, it's a good question. Take, for example, somebody who has like an addicted family member. And you've tried things and it doesn't work. Nothing's changed yet. And you're very worried. And you're worried there'll be an overdose. You're worried there'll be a car accident. You're worried there'll be a medical catastrophe. You're worried that somebody's just ruining their life, right? And so you're living with that. But you try one thing after another. And you also always think there's something wrong with what you're doing. So you don't quite accept that it really is what it is. You keep thinking, well, if only I do this, my relative will change. If only I do that, my relative will change. If only my relative would do this, or maybe I should go talk to my other relative, my uncle, who will then talk to my relative. There's just always a scheme going on where you're not really accepting that at least in this moment, you're stuck. That doesn't mean 10 minutes from now you'll be stuck. But stuckness is something that evolves like everything else. You can be stuck 1 minute and not stuck the next. But if you're aware that you're stuck, wait a minute, this has been going on a long time. My relative is not seeming to get anywhere, not anywhere different from what I can tell. Though actually, got to keep in mind, they might be getting further than you think, because actually you can't see what's going on inside their brain. So it's quite, but you just see the external manifestations of stuckness. It makes you feel stuck. And then so, but I think that, Andrea, your question goes to the heart of, this is not a simple step. And I've been through this step many times myself, and many of you have, I'm sure, where you go from, like I've had this happen where I'm talking about a family member of mine that's, I think, stuck. And then I feel stuck in relation to that family member. But then I'm telling somebody else. And then I realize when I'm telling somebody else, I'm really stuck. It's sort of like I hear myself talking and I think, wow, this is difficult. No wonder I'm having trouble sleeping at night, etc. Right?
As you're talking, you're highlighting the taking a step back part of mindfulness.
Yeah. Right. Taking a step outside and seeing it. And sometimes if you talk to someone else and you realize you're stuck, the other person says, well, actually, I see some signs of progress. And then it's sort of good you talk to that person. Then you realize, yeah, I guess that's true because I'm living day in and day out inside the tunnel. Somebody else comes along and they see it from a different angle, and all of a sudden it's different. So you start out, step one, you're stuck, you recognize you're stuck, you're mindful of being stuck. And like Andrea is saying, you're sort of taking one step outside your position and looking in at your life and saying, we're stuck here. Second step, once you're stuck and you realize you're stuck, see if you can tease out what are the opposing forces. To me, I didn't used to do this, but now I look for it. If I'm stuck, there's almost always an opposition going on between one perspective and another perspective, one person and another person, one possible decision or another possible decision. It's just, or my relative's thought and my thought, my wife's thought and my thought. I mean, you start to see, oh, stuckness doesn't happen by accident. Stuckness is a reality because of history, that we've become stuck because we have opposing positions. And if you can realize what is the opposition that's going on, that's a step, for me, that's a step forward. I think, oh, all right. Now I don't just feel chaotically stuck. I don't feel just hopeless and pessimistic. I feel like, okay, there's a war going on. There's a war between position number one and position number two. Position number one is I should now set a limit on my relative and say, if you continue to use these drugs for one more week, you're out of this house and we won't pay for anything else. Position number two is don't do that. That's a terrible idea. Then your relative's going to be out on the street without any support from you. How's that going to help things? So already you realize, wait a minute, I'm stuck because there's two opposing positions inside my own head or between me and someone else. Now in a way, you've dissected, you've sort of deconstructed stuckness into two opposing positions, two or more. All right. So now you've got this, in a way, dissected out.
So Charlie, this step 2 relates to a question we got from one of our audience members, which is, how can I better understand what my person is experiencing from her perspective to better empathize as a way for me to cope, particularly when in the midst of emotion dysregulation and emotion storm? And I think this person asking the question highlights one point, that the goal of understanding is for me to cope versus trying to get the person to change. I think that's a piece of it. But what would you add to how this relates to step 2?
I think usually when you can see that there's an opposition going on, it's usually easier to empathize with one side than the other. It's usually easier to empathize with your own side or to empathize. And if the war is within your own brain, it's usually easier to empathize with one side or the other. You know, one person feels much more comfortable with and correct with setting limits. Another person feels much more comfortable with empathizing and validating. And yet they're both on the same team. So I think what you do there, if I understand this question correctly, Andrea, is it's not just like step one. It's not simple. Once you dissect out these two positions, actually step three becomes you validate both sides. Like find something in both sides to validate. To do that, you literally have to. This is the way Marsha Linehan used to talk about it. She'd say, you have to get inside the skin of the other person. And what they're doing in their skin might be something you totally object to. And so you don't feel like getting inside their skin. You just think it's crazy, or it's not productive, or it's ruining their life, or it's self-destructive. And yet you need to get inside their own skin and drop your own for a little bit and just say, huh. Like I had one patient once who was an alcoholic 17-year-old. And when she was telling me about drinking, and she hadn't told her parents she was hiding this, but she was an alcoholic from age 13. And when she's telling me about drinking on weekends, and I said, so it sounds like you should give up drinking. And she said, no, I'll never give up drinking. Why not? She said, because I love alcohol. I said, tell me about that. I realized that seems like a trite statement. Of course, I love alcohol is like I could say I love chocolate, but it's sort of like, wait a minute, tell me about that. And the way she described it when I said, tell me more about it, oh my God, I wanted to become an alcoholic like 5 minutes later. I'm listening to her and thinking, oh my God, it solves so much. How could you not be an alcoholic? And of course you drink. You don't even know you're going to drink. You don't even plan to drink. You just go to a college dormitory to have a party and you want to have fun. And you end up drinking so much you pass out every weekend. Like, wow, you really love it. And so once I got that I could get that she loved drinking and that drinking made sense to her in her mindset, I had to get out of my brain. I come from a family of alcoholism, and I had spent my life against it. And I had to let go of all of that and say, oh my God, let me enter into the world of an alcoholic for a moment and then think about it and then say something to her. And then she realizes Charlie really got it. You got it. And she says, no, don't become an alcoholic. Then you won't be as good a therapist for me. I said, that's true. That's true. I won't become an alcoholic. I'm just realizing. And so it's kind of like you have to work at getting inside the skin. And how do you know if you get inside the skin? If you get a chance to communicate, if your relative is able to communicate with you and you with them, then they're gonna tell you. They're going to say, oh, it seems like you finally understand. It seems like you get why I get violent sometimes. It seems like you get why I don't want to leave my room and don't want to talk to people because people are dangerous or whatever it is. So I think that step two is really dissecting out where is the opposition. Step three is, can you find the wisdom on both sides, which means letting go of your own for a while and getting into theirs. And when I say let go of your own, I mean 100% for the moment. And this is something that's hard for people to do in validation, even practicing DBT therapists. It's very hard to validate people who are doing things you don't like or don't approve of, don't agree with, fundamentally are turned off by. You have to really drop all of your presuppositions at the door and get inside their brain, inside their shoes, and be empathic. So that's step three, is you're validating both sides. Step four is something you don't do. Step four is that there is a temptation when you're stuck to resolve it by reactivity yourself, by becoming emotionally reactive, by getting into what in DBT we call emotion mind. You get into emotion mind and you get defensive. You get into emotion mind and you get judgmental of your relative or of yourself. you get into emotion mind and you get impulsive. And you think, well, to hell with it. Then we're not going to do that anymore. Or then you have to do this. Or you're going to have to move out of this house. Or I'm never going to talk to you again. All these things that you actually don't mean in your wiser self. But in the moment, you react because you realize I'm really stuck and this is terrible and I can't stand it anymore. And it's your version of sort of like emotion mind. So family members get into emotion mind and they say things they later regret. They say things that don't really represent their deeper self. And so then you have to watch out when you're seeing the validity on both sides and you're trying to get at that, to not be too reactive. You need to step back a little bit and let yourself process what you're going through. Let yourself be mindful of what you're going through. Validate that it's painful, but don't act it out, is the idea. So that step 4 is non-reactivity, like trying to be non-reactive. And instead, and I think even in the family connections workshop that I attended, there was a distinction made between responding versus reacting, which I've never thought of that way before, but I thought it was a good one. That reaction is coming out of emotion mind. Like, boom, I'm reacting because this is how I feel right now. Responding is I'm noticing what's going on. I'm stepping into myself and I'm taking in what I get and I'm thinking, processing what's going on. And then I'm responding to my relative after I've had a chance to do a few breaths, a few thoughts, a little bit of respite. So now we're at step 4. Now we're at step 5. What's next? Next step is what I'll just say is to pause. Pause. I guess that's to distinguish it from my dog, pause, or my cat. It's like pause. You pause. Now, why do I say pause? Because of this. Here's why. A lot of people who talk about being dialectical try to force the next step. Like they see validity on both sides of an opposition, and then they say, now let me force the synthesis. Now let me find the synthesis. And sometimes that means, let me find the point equidistant between the two positions. Let me find a compromise between the two positions that's 50-50. That's not what's meant here. That's really not what's meant here. Sometimes you can find a 50-50 compromise that invalidates both sides. So it's what's interesting, what's unique about dialectics, and it's more like play, and Marsha Linehan's favorite metaphor for dialectics was it's jazz, playing jazz. A jazz musician doesn't just sort of find the midpoint between the two tension in the previous measure of music. You find a new synthesis that somehow respects both sides. You find a synthesis that respects. How do you do that? This is the most creative part of being dialectical. You have to pause. In other words, not force it. You need to hold on to embracing both sides and let your brain go to work. Even your sleeping brain, because sometimes you go to sleep and you wake up the next day, you say, I know what to do. I know what to do. I can't have my relative living in this house anymore because it's driving me crazy to see them so stuck every day. I can't even do my own life. So you've been thinking, so I have to kick them out of the house. No, I don't want to kick them out of the house. Got to kick them out of the house. No, I don't want to kick them out of the house. And you're going both ways. And then I would say, the next step, somebody might wake up in the morning and say, you know what it is? Actually, the real problem is not kicking them out of the house. I need them to not be in front of me all the time. So they can be in the house, but they have to hang out in a room that's not where I spend my day. I need to have some free space. I need to have some free time. And yet I don't want to dismiss them. I don't want to throw them out. So you find a compromise in between the two, but it isn't a 50-50 compromise. It's sort of like it pays attention to the fact that you need something and they need something. And both are valid, even though they don't look like they're on the same team. And that's many times what's the case. And there are, I think, and how do you find this? I think you find this by trial and error, by conversations, by talking to yourself, by talking to different people, by writing, by going to a family connections meeting, by going to some other group meeting, by talking to some relatives. You find that once you have, it's like you're posing a problem for yourself. What should I do? Because I think this is the case and my relative is doing this, and we're at odds with each other. What should I do? Don't answer it right away. And this is where, in Marsha Linehan's way of talking about this, she'd say, ask wise mind. Ask wise mind what to do. If you don't know what wise mind is, that's all right. It's basically comes out in the DBT training, and it has this idea that there is wisdom within every person, and you can find your wise self if you can look for it. So you want to ask wise mind, God, I want to do an ultimatum, but I don't think I can live with an ultimatum. And I don't know if it'll help my relative. So what should I do, wise mind? It's sort of like talking to God. It's within DBT, there's not a God, but there's wise mind. It's probably the closest equivalent to God. It's like you ask wise mind, and you ask other people. You know, like when my wife was getting to know me, this was hard on me when I first heard this. Like I loved her right away, but she had to ask like 14 people, was I a good choice for her? Like she had to have a whole consortium to consult with. And that's the way she found her wise mind, was she was a very relational person and she needed to bounce things off of everybody. That didn't mean she was going to do what they said, but it meant she was a thinking process. Whereas how do I do things? With my Swedish, German, and Danish background and my family of very independent people, I go off by myself and figure something out. So there you go. I want to get to the next step. So there you go. You're looking for a synthesis. You try this, you try that. It's like trial and error. You try a conversation, you try a thought experiment of what to do. And then you try to come back into your wise mind and figure out, what should I do? And then your next step is an attempt to get to a synthesis. And that synthesis is somehow honoring yourself and honoring your relative, or it's honoring the part of yourself that has one idea and the part of yourself that has another idea. Or if you're in a composition and you're a parental couple, you're finding a synthesis between your spouse, whose way of coping with this distress is to leave the house all the time, and your way of coping with it, which is to be there all the time, and things like that. So how do you honor both sides and come out with a new way of being? And then that becomes your next episode of the reality show that I'm talking about. I never thought of that metaphor until today. It's because I've been watching some episodes lately of different things more than I used to. So that's it. I'm going to leave now minutes for questions.
All right. So we have got 6 steps, practical tools. People are asking for a summary, so let me see if I've got this. Step 1, recognize you're stuck. Practice this mindfully. Step 2, notice the opposing forces between you and the other person, potentially between you and yourself, and traps you're facing or decisions you're weighing. Step 3, validate all sides. I'm going to pause here, Charlie, with some questions that came in relevant to step 3.
Okay.
So one person asked, when you're validating all sides, are you intentionally validating your side to the other person or just showing that you understand their perspective?
I think it's more the latter, but not necessarily. It depends on the circumstance. It depends on what the dialogue is like with your relative. It might be that you want to highlight both sides, but actually it might be that at the most important part of that is that you get what's going on with your relative and convey that and communicate that and say, I've been frustrated with what you've been doing for the past month, but I've been thinking about it and thinking about your life and thinking about what you've been through. And I've been realizing I'm probably wrong. I want to apologize to you for assuming that my way is the best way. I'd like to know more about what are you thinking? And then the person might tell you more. To do that, I'm not at all out loud validating my own position, but in a way, I'm validating my own position silently. And that's good enough. for that dialogue. A later dialogue, you might have a more complicated conversation where you would communicate both sides. That's my thought about it right now.
In order to validate all sides, you talked about getting into the skin of the other person. We had an audience member say that getting into the skin of my loved one scares me so bad that I shut down out of fear. How do I get past this? One thing I want to share is this is exactly what our Family Connections MSTR class gets at, and we have skills for that. So if you relate to this comment, check out our website to see if this class is a fit for you. But Charlie, what would you say in just the short, too long didn't read, the TLDR version of this question?
The what version?
Too long didn't read. That's
Too long.
internet speak, but that short TLDR.
Oh, I didn't know that. All right.
When I am, I need to do this to be dialectical, and I am freaking terrified.
So I think I would start out by saying to my relative, I think I need to understand where you're coming from, and it scares the bejesus out of me. So you're acknowledging that it's frightening, because that would probably come as a surprise to your relative to hear that it's actually that frightening for you. Maybe it wouldn't, but I think that you might need to first acknowledge that, the way I acknowledged at the beginning of this talk today, that this made me more anxious than most trainings I've ever done. That was a helpful thing for me to do. Actually, just to say that helped me move forward.
That was your step one.
That was my step one. I'm stuck, right? I'm stuck. And then, yeah, but to validate, I think, of something that you're terrified of, yeah, there are things to be terrified of in your relative sometimes. You know, you might not want to hear right now why they want to be dead. You might not be ready for that. But you might say, I'm terrified that you seem to want to be dead. And I want to ask you about it, but I'm also scared of what you're going to say. Something like that, just a little bit complicated, and you're being honest. And yet you're communicating something very important to your relative.
Excellent. So step 3, validating all sides. We move on from step 4 is stop, don't react, and refrain from doing impulsive things. Step 5, you moved on to pause, drawing from the different sides. And I think throughout this process, we're really honoring that dialectic of going slow in order to go fast. Often we want to rush through. Our emotion mind and the threats that we're facing tell us to do this. So it is that slowing down. Somebody asked for the difference between step 4 and 5. That was a little unclear. How would you differentiate the two?
Well, step 4 is really, as I think of it, but it's still a good question, is that you're refraining. You're basically you're biting your tongue. you're refraining from saying and doing certain things because you can feel. In DBT, it would be called the stop skill. You're holding yourself back from doing something that you think is not going to be helpful. So you try to let go of your judgments. You try to not yell at your relative. You try to go to another room and just sort of like be yourself for a while and calm down, get your level of distress down a little bit before you continue, something like that. That's step 4. Step 5 is a bigger deal. It's sort of like step 5 might happen in 1 minute, like it did with that hospital therapist that said, I'm going to teach you the skills of how to beat me in the courtroom, which he thought of immediately. But many times for me, with one of my family members, step 5 has taken months asking, how can I live with that he's being the way he's being and I am the way I am? And it involves conversations, it involves back and forth, it involves trying things out. So step 5 is often a longer term project. It's your term paper in school. It's not a multiple choice. It's like what you do at the end of the semester. It's like after thinking about everything, you put it together. So that's it. Let me make one more comment, Andrea, about pertinent to what we were just saying. I've mentioned the word ultimatum several times, and I want to say something about ultimatums. I've given ultimatums a lot of thought. If you think you're doing an ultimatum, meaning I'm going to kick you out if you don't do this or you don't do that, you have to be really ready to take the consequences of an ultimatum. And you have to realize that an ultimatum should be done for you, not for your relative, because you don't know if it's going to help your relative. and you think it's my relative needs me to kick him out. He needs to hit bottom. That might be true, but there's a good chance it won't be, and you might regret it later. So it's kind of like how to figure that out. That's just one of many dilemmas for families in this situation. And I just want to say one more thing. I said to my wife this morning, who's a therapist, I said, what should I tell them?
Mm-hmm.
And she said, tell them to never give up.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to add that.
I think that's exactly where we should end. Of course, there's more questions, and I encourage you to talk about these questions, this process with people in your network. We will share the recording, and thank you so much, Charlie, for sharing your wisdom, both with understanding the philosophy of dialectics, but also the wisdom that comes with your emotions too.
Thank you, Andrea. I appreciate it.
Folks, thank you. Please join me in thanking Charlie and Andrea for a very engaging and informative presentation today. We appreciate your time and for sharing your knowledge with our community. So watch for an email with a link to the recording of today's webinar. We want to thank all of the attendees for being a part of the solution in transforming so many lives. We offer webinars like this for free, knowing that there's a huge need, and we kindly ask that you please consider a donation, which will help us to continue offering fantastic programs like this one. To donate, you can use a QR code on the screen or the link in the chat. We also hope to see you again at our next event, which I believe is tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. The link to the register is in the chat. It's with a best-selling author and mental health advocate, Mike Venny, who will present You Are the Advocate You've Been Looking For in this 60-minute webinar co-hosted with Emotions Matter. If you have any questions about this webinar or any of our events, please reach out to Robin at neabpd.org. Thank you all very much for participating and attending.
Thank you, Jim.